Hello, I'm Arik Korman, Communications Director at League of Education Voters, and the parent of a fifth grade son in the public school system who receives special education services. Like many of you, I'm trying to do coronavirus triple duty, working, parenting, and teaching from home. In case you're not familiar with us, League of Education Voters is a statewide nonprofit working with families, educators, and leaders to build a brighter future for every Washington student. Our website is educationvoters.org. Our vision is that every student in Washington state has access to an excellent public education that provides an equal opportunity for success. Welcome to our free online webinar series, Lunchtime Webinars. We started this series 6 years ago to share information and build knowledge on important and timely issues. Today's webinar is about Now is the Time to Redefine School. During this time of school closures and continuous learning, disparities in educational justice are growing rapidly. When students finally do return to the classroom, why should we return to a system that isn't serving every student? Our presenter today is Trish Millines Dziko, Executive Director of TAF, the Technology Access Foundation. She will share TAF's vision of building a more impactful education system that disrupts centuries of racial inequities, enables us to bring out and nurture the genius in every child, and honors teachers as professionals. She will go through short and long-term goals, as well as what needs to be true to implement that vision. And she will answer your questions. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. You'll notice a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. This is a space for you to submit questions to us. As always, feel free to send any feedback about the webinar quality to us on the chat function at the bottom of your screen or at info@educationvoters.org. Trish Millines Dziko is the co-founder and executive director of TAF, the Technology Access Foundation. A native of New Jersey, Trish focused on college and ultimately became a first-generation college student. Ms. Dziko also made history by becoming the first woman to be awarded a full basketball scholarship from Monmouth College in West Long Branch, New Jersey. She received her BS in computer science in 1979. Trish spent 15 years working in the high-tech industry as a software developer, manager, and consultant, as well as a database designer in such industries as military weapons, business systems, communications, and medical equipment. In 1988, Trish became one of the early employees at Microsoft. It was during her nearly 9 years at Microsoft that she became active in promoting awareness of the importance of diversity in the corporate world. In 1995, while working as a senior diversity administrator for Microsoft, she noted the small numbers of African Americans and other people of color in the high-tech industry. Attributing it partly to the limited access of those students and their families to computers, Trish became co-founder of the Technology Access Foundation, TAF, a Seattle-based organization designed to provide science, technology, engineering, and mathematics skills to children of color. She became the full-time TAF executive director after leaving Microsoft in 1996. As one of the young Microsoft millionaires at 39, Trish contributed over $150,000 to establish TAF. TAF's programs seek to increase mathematical and literacy competencies for K-8 students through project-based activities that use technology as a tool for learning in an after-school environment. Each year, about 70 teenagers enroll in the Technical Teens Internship Program that includes courses in programming, website development, networking, and career development skills. The program also provides job readiness training, college entrance preparation, and paid summer internships with local corporations or small businesses for practical experience. In addition, about 200 5 to 12-year-olds take computer classes to enhance their reading, math, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills. Since its founding on October 1st, 1996, TAF has taken the lead in preparing African Americans and other students of color for training in science and technology fields in colleges and universities. In June 2001, Trish received an honorary Doctor of Humane Letters from Seattle University. She lives in Seattle and continues to guide the Technology Access Foundation. Welcome, Trish Dziko.
Hi, thank you very much. Very excited to be here. A lot of people don't know I used to be on the board of the League of Education Voters, so it's good to be back. I'm going to share my screen now. Can you see?
Yes.
Actually, stop sharing for a minute.
Oh, it looked great.
Was it the presentation that I
It sure
shared?
was.
Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, that's perfect.
All right. So thank you all for coming. Um, I think that everybody can agree that, among other things, this pandemic has brought to the surface the symptoms of chronic underfunding, curricular policies that put testing ahead of world learning in our schools. And basically, we school kids instead of educating them. We make them believe learning has an end to it. Our mission is to build collaborative relationships with public education to create access to transformative systems of learning for students and teachers of color to eliminate race-based disparities in an increasingly diverse society. So I want you all to kind of close your eyes for a minute. I'm going to read for you the first paragraph of our vision for our schools, and it kind of encapsulates the full vision. So imagine a public school that redefines STEM literacy, equitable education, and what it means to be well-educated 21st century student. Imagine a school known for encouraging innovation, for pushing the limits of what is expected during delivering curriculum in a way that is relevant to real world needs and the goals of students, and creating an environment that promotes academic success through a social justice lens. Imagine a school where learning is designed for and often by the students, where teachers collaborate as part of their daily practice and learn alongside their students, where parents are welcome in the classroom at any time, and where professionals in other fields participate in teaching and learning. When you walk in this school, you sense there is a bond of caring between all the groups: teachers, students, leadership, and staff, where people look out for each other and students support each other to deliver their very best. And we believe that a school like this has 4 different tenets to create it. And I'm going to walk through each of these, and I'm going to talk about the short term, which is about 3 to 5 years, and then the long term, and then what needs to be true to start and sustain these efforts. So when you think about philosophy and culture, we're really talking about belief and behavior. Pedagogy, we're talking about what goes on in the classroom as well as content. And of course, having a diverse staff is about who we have in front of our students. And the expanded community talks more about everyone else that surrounds the school that becomes a part of the learning process. So let's dive into belief. So what does it mean for my staff and for all the adults to come together and form a philosophy for the school? So when you look at TAF at Sahali, our philosophy is no limits. We also believe that if I judge you, I cannot teach you. It'll be interesting to see how many different answers you get back if you ask your administration and staff of your school, what is the philosophy of your school? When we think about long term, we've got to develop an onboarding protocol so that everybody that comes into the school adopts this philosophy and understands it. And then what needs to be true is that every single adult, for this to work, every single adult has to adopt and practice the philosophy. When we move into culture, we're really talking about behavior. So philosophy was belief, culture is behavior. How are we creating a culture that serves all of our students in a way that they can bring their authentic self to the classroom? So we owe every student the opportunity to be the best that they can be. They can't be if we have different standards for different kids, because we're essentially judging them. And remember, if I judge you, I can't teach you. Learning is a process, it's not a product. So students and teachers need the kind of time to prepare for learning and doing the work. And when we move kids through the standards, when they're not ready, we essentially are setting them up to fail. So we need to have this culture where kids, we have this high expectation, but kids are willing to take academic risks because we built this culture of love and understanding. On the long term, we need to strive for, sorry, um, we need to strive for school cultures. Um, we need to strive for school cultures that are welcoming to everyone and everybody on the campus develops, so students and adults alike. We still give middle school and high school teachers 150 to 180 students each year and wonder why kids aren't successful. We know it's not right, but we keep doing it because in our country, we don't believe students are worth the dollars it would take for a proper student teacher load. And what needs to be true is that this academic tracking, which creates a false notion of who's smart and who isn't, needs to go away. So often students are moved along because they master the mechanics of, say, math, but they don't really understand the why behind it. Then you have students who can clearly demonstrate the how and the why of using math through something that's meaningful to them, say building a tiny house for the homeless population. But they're terrible at sitting down in front of a bunch of problem sets that are irrelevant to them. So we have to think of different ways to engage them. The crux of this now is the pedagogy. So when you look at this wheel here, what we're really talking about is project-based learning here. And this comes from the Buck Institute. It's the model we subscribe to. And the focus is around the getting key knowledge and understanding and skills in all of the subjects. So students start with a challenging problem or question, then they go off and learn a little more about it through sustained inquiry. They get an authentic experience like a field trip or having a professional come to the classroom. And then they're armed with this information and they go off and determine their approach. And this is where the student voice and choice comes in. They determine their approach, their lens, and their final product. And then they spend time reflecting on their choice. We need to give kids time to reflect on what they're learning and share with each other. Then they present in front of their classmates to gain critical feedback. We call it a critical friends group before they present to an audience. We also use this thing called claims, evidence, and reasoning to help kids justify their work. When you have a deep pedagogy, and it doesn't have to be project-based learning, there are plenty of other ones out there where you foster that deep thinking, change happens. So when you think about short term, we have standards that are packaged in our curriculum. And we assume that if we go through the curriculum, all the standards would be hit. We need to teach how to think through complex problems, going deeper and prioritizing standards as opposed to shallowly hitting as many standards as possible. And when you go deep into a standard and you prioritize thinking through problems within that standard, that those thinking structures that are built can be used anywhere for any other standard. The most controversial piece of this is the competency-based performance assessment. We rely too heavily on standardized tests. They don't really tell us anything. And what it ends up doing is it ends up having us judge students in their future based off how they score on these tests. So we believe that performance-based assessment is a they develop students in their communities. It's ultimately unfair for us to have this inequitable system where students are able to, we assume students can remove themselves from a situation and the realities at home and engage in school-focused tasks. So how do we align them better? I mean, it's our job as educators to foster learning that helps students grapple with the now. Standards still can be assessed pretty accurately using a variety of methods, and so we need to take time to explore those. And this really, really requires heavy professional development. It's interesting that our teachers are assessed by performance and observation and conversations, but students are not. So just think about that. Long term, we need to think about having a change in structure in our systems. We have 6 period days. That's a lot of changing classes and not a lot of chance to dig in and really grapple with some of the content that we're asking kids to grapple with. And what needs to be true is our willingness really to get away from these standardized tests and our willingness to give teachers the reins in assessment and giving them the type of professional development that they need to do this work. We tend to introduce things and then we expect that teachers will just grab onto it without us really investing in some serious training. So the investment in professional development, which you'll hear in this presentation as well as in the questions, is huge. We start to look at content. We're looking at culturally relevant content. It's very important that kids see themselves. We have a hegemonic system, hegemonic structures. The content is white-centered, and that needs to change. So we need to take the time to help our students see the world through multiple cultures. And it's just as important for white students to have exposure to other cultures and communities as it helps them move away from a colonizer's mindset. And not all content that's billed as culturally relevant is actually so. When you think about some of the pieces of content that are out there, they're not necessarily talking about the right type of cultures. They're not digging deeper. They're not, they're done through a Eurocentric lens. So we need to really take the time to choose wisely the type of content that is needed for our students to be more well-rounded and feel represented. What needs to be true is our willingness to move away from white-centered content. Mostly everything is Eurocentric, particularly when we're looking at humanities. It's time to change that. Currently, the representation is usually wrong, woefully inadequate, and is limited to a few key figures. So who we put in front of the classroom matters, and there is a plethora of research out there about the importance of having teachers of color. You know, for our state, being one of the whitest states in the country, it's not an easy task to increase the number of teachers of color, but it's possible. A lot of our paras are of color. If we created better pathways for them to become full-time teachers, I know that work is going on now at the state level. We just need to increase it a little more. So our schools are not great environments for teachers of color, so let's start there. We have principals that need to ensure that they've created an environment where teachers of color can thrive. Imagine what it's like to be a new teacher of color feeling disrespected, the lens that you bring to the table is not honored, and you get the kids of color dumped on your classroom doorstep because the other teachers don't want to deal with them, and they figure, well, you're a person of color, you can handle it. This is not how you run an environment that's welcoming to all teachers from all cultures. Our state needs to get behind this effort with a little more oomph and a little more resources. And what needs to be true here is this environment, the cultural shift. The principals need to have a cultural shift among them. Could start with an on racial equity training process. It's not a certification. So this goes on through the entire career of every teacher that's in the school. And finally, when we look at the expanded community, you know, learning does not take place just in the school. It takes place everywhere, and it's reciprocal. So we need to tap into the knowledge and expertise that kids already have. You know, we act like learning takes place uh, only in the school, and we need to avoid those derogatory words like learning loss and catching up. I heard that so much during this pandemic, and when kids had to get learn at home. This whole idea that, oh my God, they're going to lose things, they're going to lose learning or catch up. What are they catching up to? You know, do we assume that they can't learn unless they're sitting in their seat for 6 periods a day? For a lot of families, schools do the teaching. Like historically, schools have done the teaching, but we need to break down those barriers and create healthy, cultural, responsive ways that we can shift the understanding of how learning happens. And then we need to connect more with our stakeholders in the community and provide, they can provide valuable resources that we need. So what needs to be true is that we need a system that that's in place that enables schools to offer regular external experiences for students and teachers, and building those relationships with corporations and foundations and local businesses. When we think about the response to COVID-19 and how hard it was to get technology into the hands of students, this was really a good time for corporations to step up. But if you don't have those relationships already built, they're not going to. They don't understand the why of things beyond the basic. Kids need to have technology at home while we're asking them to learn it. So I'm gonna stop there, and I know that was really fast, but I really want to have more Q&A than anything. I want to acknowledge our team of contributors, our coaches. We have 5 stellar academic coaches that spend their days developing professional development for our teaching partners, as well as helping them figure out how they can bring a virtual project-based learning to the virtual world for our students while our students are at home. And for Heather LEVinar, our Executive Director of Education, who leads our entire education department. And I will leave you with this. Our students and teachers deserve the best. Let's give it to them. Thank you.
And thank you, Trish Millines Dziko. That's fantastic. Would it be possible to share the presentation with everyone who is part of this webinar?
Yes, absolutely.
Great, great. If you email it to me, then I'll make sure it's included in the follow-up email.
Yes.
Excellent, great. Well, we've got about 10 minutes for questions. Trish, do you have to leave right at 1 or can you stay a little bit beyond?
Oh, I can stay. I'm good.
Okay. Great, great. For everyone who's participating, please type your questions in the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen. No question is too basic. And I want to acknowledge everyone who has been lively typing away in the chat function. Feel free to continue to do that. It'll just be harder for me to track questions that are in the chat. But if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A. And I've got one to kick us off. How do you change the belief systems so that educators believe that every student can succeed?
Well, I think it starts with each individual teacher examining for themselves, why do they teach? Did you come to teach to deliver a canned curriculum and give canned tests to determine if your kid learned? Or did you come to actually inspire kids to learn, to inspire kids to explore? If you can't believe in every kid, why are you a teacher? Yeah, I've run into a number of teachers that believe in tracking students, believe that certain kids can only get so far. And some are well-meaning, right? They'll do things like, I don't want to give a lot of homework because I know your home environment is challenging. Mm-hmm. Well, think of some other thing to do. Don't just do nothing, right? But it's the process, and it really starts with self-examination. And what I found is in our racial equity training, that's really helped a lot of our teachers of all races examine who they are and how they see other people and what's important to them in their profession. But it is a process. It's just not something that you can turn on. It's not a training you can do and then all of a sudden you're done.
Great, thank you so much. One question that came in is, will this webinar be recorded? And the answer quickly is yes, it definitely will. So you'll receive a link to the recording in the follow-up email. So here's another question. Is in working toward the education you imagined and laid out for us, what is the role of parents in creating the necessary systems change?
Well, first we need to help parents understand what the new model is, what it is you're trying to achieve. One of the things that we've seen in our partner schools is an uptick in parent involvement when when they come for the exhibition of learning and they see what's going on. But prior to that, I'll use Bose Elementary for an example because it's the most stark example that we have. Bose Elementary is in Tacoma. They are in the 5th-year partnership with us. And before we came there, they were like every other school, did not have a lot of parent activity. But all of a sudden, their kids were coming home talking about the projects they're working on and talking about they can't be late, get me to school on time, I can't miss today. And all of a sudden, the interest perked up. Like, what is it that my kid needs to see? What is going on at that school? I've got to see what's going on. We had, out of the 400 and some odd students, we had about 300 families at the first exhibition of learning. And it's been that way for the 5 years. We had to split it up because we did them all at one night, K through 5, and we ended up having to split them up because there's too many people in the building. Once parents see what's going on, then they find a role for themselves in the classroom because they built that relationship with teachers and they have an understanding. The trick now and the challenge for us is, how do we translate that to home? How do we make sure that the things that are going on at home kind of take that same flavor of, I have a guiding question, not officially, right? But I'm thinking about something and how do I approach learning in this way? That's the thing that we are working on. And I also want to make sure um, everyone understands is that we don't think we have it all down, right? This is a journey and this is continued work, but we continue to improve. So one of the learnings we have is, how do we get parents and families and caregivers to exercise the same kind of things at home that their students do at school?
Yeah, I have a piggyback question that comes with that,
Mm-hmm.
which is, this really needs to be a national movement and ultimately a change in American values. What are your thoughts on that?
I would love it to be a national movement, and not that it has to be the STEM by TAF model, right? I think there are other models out there that subscribe to the same philosophies that we have. I think that we need to change from the top, though. We have a lot of grassroots efforts going on, but they're not enough that we can all come together and change the top. The people at the top really need to think about, why are we educating kids? Or how should we be educating kids? What does it mean to be well educated in Washington State? I'll just talk about Washington State. What does it mean to be well educated? What are the resources and are we willing to spend it? I mean, some of this is money and some of this is will. So we need to be able to separate the two and figure out how to tackle them. But yes, it should be a national movement. We're not doing our kids any favor with these tests. We're just not.
Great, thank you so much. So the next question I have is about clarification of terms. The question is, what do you mean when you say colonizer's mindset?
Um, Essentially, our country is built on a system where the people who landed here and took over here are the colonizers, and the assumption that everything is built for them, which is true. Our education system was built for middle class white kids. It wasn't built for poor kids. It wasn't built for kids of color. And it's still that way when you look at our content, when you look at who is centered, when you look at who is valued. It still says that they have that colonizer's mindset. And we want to have kids growing up believing that every person has value and every person can be um, can achieve. That's not how we bring them out now, because what we see in media, what we see in our textbooks, is that white is right and white is best.
Great, thank you very much.
Mhm.
So here's a question about implementation during COVID-19. How do we put your vision into practice now with the limitations of online learning?
Oh, this is the beauty of having one of the best instructional coaching teams out there. They're working on it now. In fact, they're working with our current teachers on how do you take this project-based learning model and bring it to the home, right? Knowing that a lot of it requires connection, collaboration, also requires the kind of materials that we may not have. So now we have to adjust. What can kids do at home? Our first trial is going to be at our summer camp, and it's for incoming sixth graders for TAF at Holly School and for Washington Middle School. And we're sending them a package or giving them a package of physical materials that they can work on when they're not online, and they're going to be online 2 days a week for 2 hours each time. So we're going to get them through a whole week of material with only seeing them for 4 hours out of the whole week. It's a really good way to introduce this work and a good way for us to figure out, can we actually do this during the school year?
Great, thank you very much. So here's another question about expanding educators of color across the state. How do we build in the need to support teachers of color in schools at school building and the district level? I'm a school board member, so I'm curious about equity policies or evaluations of principals, or what are some options to explore? My daughter is biracial and with autism, and she's doing well at Spokane's project-based the community school.
My biggest point around this is really about the principal. So thank you for asking that question. I've sat on panels, I've attended conferences where the onus has been put on the colleges of education and the professors. That's it. And very rarely did I see teachers or principals in these events, right? It would always be teachers of color plus the college and university folks, but never principals. Principals are responsible for the building. I think as a superintendent or a board member, if that's not part of the evaluation of a principal in terms of the environment they create for teachers of color, then it should be. And there are a number of elements that you can look at and form a rubric to figure out if they're meeting it, and then get them to a training or develop a training that talks about how you create these environments. There's training that's out there already, but it has to be ongoing. But it's hugely important, and it does fall on the shoulder of the principal.
Great, thank you. Here's a question about students receiving special education services. In your vision, how can we include more students with a variety of learning and physical challenges? My students are challenged severely, and while technology has opened up a new world for them, they still need and require more to keep up. Thank you for being here.
One of the great things about using project-based learning as the center of your pedagogy is that you can group kids in a way that they all find their strengths and develop their weaknesses, and they also learn how to work with each other. One of the things we do is we try to follow the policy of the district that we're in, but we don't segregate our special ed students unless they have to be pulled out for like speech therapy or special direct instruction, but making sure they are part of the work and that there's something that they can achieve in there and they can see their growth. And that there's also that support from their classmates to give them that comfort of being able to take these academic risks and not feeling like a failure, and seeing that kids who they think are smarter than them actually have failures as well, right? So they need to be in this environment where, like one of my daughters is a special needs kid. And one of the things that I always had challenges with at our school is this whole idea of segregation and who's better than who. And when you have everybody together, you don't have that, When you have everybody cooperating and being part of a school family, you don't have those kind of things. So it's more culture than it is the structure of the actual school day.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So this is a question about repair. What is the best way to repair relationships with disenfranchised communities? Do you have any key points or strategies?
That's a big, broad question.
Yeah.
It really is. A lot depends on what the relationship was to begin with and how it got broken and who the community is that you're trying to connect to. But if I were to give a general answer, it would be get to know people. You know, surround yourself with people who um, look like we have in our public system across the nation is that we have teachers teaching in communities that they don't live in. And they don't have 90% of teachers in our community are white. Most of them are women, but they don't live in the community where they serve their kids. So really going that extra mile to understand, come in with understanding and observation and listening, and not coming in chatting, right? And really getting an understanding of what the needs are and where you failed and how you can bridge that gap. But it is such a broad question that there's not really a single answer.
Great, thank you. So here's a question about homework. What is your philosophy on homework in this culture of learning? We expect children to go to school all day and then continue working on schoolwork at home. As working adults, we do not do that, but are asking our children to do so. Do you agree?
I totally agree. I don't like homework, and we try not to give homework. It might be a single thing to work on, like a math problem, or read a certain passage and compare it to what's happening at home or something like that. But our philosophy is kids are in school 6.5 hours a day. They need to be working 6.5 hours a day. So that's why we have shorter, fewer periods and more depth so that they can get the support they need when they need it instead of going home and then needing some help and not being able to get it and coming back the next day feeling frustrated. So homework is asking a kid to do 3, 4, or 5 hours of homework a night. It just makes no sense. It's honestly, I'll just say this, and I know there will be a lot of teachers that hate me for this, it's laziness on the teacher's part. If you're making kids do all that work, then you haven't done your job in the school. And you can advocate for yourself by getting your principal to change your school structure so that you have fewer periods and more time with your kids. You are not helpless in this situation.
Great, thank you. So here's a question about grading. As each
Mhm.
school district is creating their own grading policies during remote learning, how can this lead to equitable treatment of students across districts? And what is your philosophy on grading?
Um, I like grading. It's not just about me, we like grading based off of standards. So, one of the things that was nice when we came to Federal Way is they had standards based, we're experimenting with standards based grading, and we were one of the guinea pigs, happily. Um, because in that time, since we've been there in 2008, we've had 5 different state tests and 3 or 4 different sets of standards. And for us, if we focus on the core standards, then we're able to get to the crux of what kids need to learn. So the thing that's nice about the system then was that you got a grade of 1 to 4 on each standard. And then that grade was translated into a letter grade. And what it did was it forced teachers to justify why they gave you a grade. It forced you as a student to understand why you are or are not meeting standards and what you need to do that. Now, none of that really works well if you're not given time and multiple ways to show that you've met a standard. It becomes just like the state test if you're not allowed to do that, right? So the key there is more time, more ways to show you've met a standard, and focus on grading the standards, not just grading whatever paper or whatever is in front of you.
Mhm. Okay, great, thank you. So here's a question about communicating with students and parents. I'd like to hear what Trish has to say about equitable communication in this COVID-19 distance learning and teaching period. What is the best way to reach every student?
Every district has done it differently. And I will say the biggest challenge was when we first went home. It was, oh, we only going to be for a few weeks. Don't worry about anything. Worry about getting lunches and food and things like that to the kids. Then it became, well, we're going to be out for the school year. Now school's important, so now you got to learn. So you set that precedent already that it's not important. So trying to bring the horse back into the barn became very difficult. I think we need to spend this summer really thinking about how do we communicate with all. It's going to be tricky. And high school teachers, 150 to 180 kids, do we want them to reach out to every single kid individually every week? That's really hard. And that takes up a lot of time. Whereas when you have them in your classroom, you can hit them all at once. So those are some of the things that we have to grapple with. Can you talk to somebody on the phone? What do you do when language barriers happen? This summer needs to be the time that districts think about those things, because I have a feeling that starting in the fall, we're not going to be in school. And if that's going to be the case, we need to come in correct.
Great, thank you. So here's a question about the optimal mix and culture within classrooms. What do you think is the optimal class size and blend of students, both abilities and academic quote unquote levels, and structure for learning in the model that you describe?
25 students in a class, max 27 per seating. Um, I think that there's no real formula on mix. You want to make sure that you have that you don't aggregate all of the kids who are achieving in one spot and then the kids who are struggling in another. You need to have just a good mix. The best way to do it is random. It's the best way to do it. We work in houses, so that means each house of 75 to 80 kids have one math, one science. This is middle school. One math, one science, one humanities teacher. So those three teachers have those 80 kids who are randomly chosen, right, for the most part. Um, and that gives you this nice mix of kids, ability-wise, socioeconomic, etc.
Great.
Gender. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we've got time for about 3 more questions. So we'll start with this about bias. Is there a self-reflection checklist which you could share with teachers who have hidden biases, who still re-traumatize students of color with history lessons, who refuse to include any world changers or present day heroes when discussing current events?
So I'll go back to my presentation where I talked about racial equity training is not there's no end to it. It's a process. So yeah, there are checklists all over that you can get, but unless you've gone through that self-examination, going through the work of continuous training, it is just a checklist. It's like we talk about the lack of diversity in our STEM industries, and now everybody's spending all this money on diversity officers. That doesn't mean anything if nothing's changing in your company, right? So this is the same thing. Having a checklist is not going to be helpful if you haven't really gone through the self-examination. There are a number of programs out there that will take teachers and other people through this process, but they have to come in and be willing to go through it and learn, learn, take themselves through that journey.
Yeah, and I've got to follow up quickly, which is part of white culture is always looking for a quick fix. How do we overcome that
Yes.
quick fix mindset?
Well, we have this expectation that kids will be lifelong learners. Why don't we have that expectation of ourselves? You know, it's a process. It's not going to just work. Bringing in a new math program is not going to make test scores go like this and stay like this, right? Just like bringing in a checklist or a quick training on one little slice of diversity or equity is not going to change the whole picture. So look, get more people of color in the classroom, get more people of color in administration, and things will start to change because you'll get away from that hegemonic system and you'll get a more well-rounded experience, a well-rounded culture, and different ways of doing things. Right now, we are so wedded and so used to doing things a certain way, and even though it's not working, we keep tacking on little things to it to try to make it work. Right? We try to add more personnel to fix this problem, or add this program to fix that problem. When really the problem is the whole system and how the system is being implemented.
Absolutely. So I have a question about school discipline, and then after that, our last question will be about implementation, how to make this a broader reality in Washington State. So can you talk a little more about restorative practices versus punitive discipline? What does that look like in practice, and what kinds of outcomes are you seeing?
Well, it's really more about acknowledging that there is a problem and there is a challenge and sitting down and working through it. Instead of saying what typically happens is a kid may act out, right, because they're bored or whatever the reason may be, and they seem to be disrupted. The easiest thing to do is to send them off principal's office. But our teachers with ways to see those things coming ahead of time of it. And then if there are multiple people involved, sitting them down and helping them figure out um, how they got to where they're at and how do they make things better. I mean, that's basically what restorative practice is, and how do I become a better citizen of the school and of the classroom.
Great. All right. And finally, how do we expand the success of TAF outside of the Federal Way School District? What resources and relationships would you need? Where would you go next? And how do you connect with districts and perhaps legislators to implement your vision?
So we are not just in Federal Way. So we have 3 schools we work with in Federal Way. We have 2 schools in Tacoma that we work with, and many of you know that we just signed a joint operating agreement with Seattle to bring our model to Washington Middle School, and that's another co-management. The other schools are transformation, so where we provide fewer resources, but it's still as impactful. And then we also are working with a school in Highland. So our goal is to have 3 new schools per year in our portfolio of transformation. We believe that anything more than that will not be good. That it's not something that we're willing to push because you can't cause learning. What you have to do is really take your time with it. We would love to be in Kent, in Renton next. And then our real goal is to get over to east of the mountains. We have Martinez Fellows, which is our program for teachers of color. We have Martinez Fellows that are already east of the mountains. We believe if we can go east of the mountains where we can't hop in a car and go fix something, that opens the door for us to be throughout the rest of the state and possibly through the country. And what do
Great.
we need?
Yes.
Well, we need people to give resources to the schools so they can be a part of this work. So it is a fee-based system, and it's not very expensive for schools. But helping schools to reallocate the budget they have, doing fundraising for the schools or for the district so that they can bring us in to do the work, train your coaches or bring our own coach in. It is a 5-year process. So again, it's a process. It's not just a start and an end. So minimum 5-year process. So being able to help schools pay for the service that we bring to the table. And that ends up being only $350 per kid per year.
Wow. That sounds
Yeah,
doable.
right? Yeah. That's very little to change your entire school culture over a 5-year period. Yeah.
Hmm. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Trish Millines Dziko. And thanks for all of you who participated and submitted questions and typed in the chat. I mean, that was a really lively discussion going on in there.
Are you capturing the chat?
Oh yeah, I'll send you the chat
Okay.
log so you'll see everything. Now, if your question wasn't answered, Trish, how can people reach you?
They can reach me at, oh boy, email STEMbyTAF, STEMBYTAF, at techaccess.org. And I believe I have that at the bottom of that last slide.
Great, excellent. I'll be sure to include that in the follow-up email that you'll be receiving in about 24 hours.
Okay.
Also, COVID-19 came up during the discussion today, and I wanted to let you know that League of Education Voters has collected resources available in communities across Washington state to help us get through this difficult time. You'll find our COVID-19 resources page on our website, educationvoters.org. Our next LEVinar is next Friday, May 22nd. Washington State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Rakedahl, will return to discuss the current state of Washington schools during COVID-19, and he'll answer your questions. You can register by visiting our website, educationvoters.org, and clicking on events, and then lunchtime LEVinars. I'll also send registration information in the follow-up email. Thank you for joining us today, to each and every one of you. If you have additional questions or comments, please send them to me, Arik at educationvoters.org. That's spelled A-R-I-K at educationvoters.org. A recording of today's presentation will be available on our website, educationvoters.org, and will be sent to you in that follow-up email, which you should be getting in your inbox in about 24 hours. Feel free to share the recording with your friends and colleagues. If you'd like to learn more about League of Education Voters or support our work, please visit educationvoters.org. Thank you for attending. Each of us has the right to feel safe and valued. We hope you will join us in future LEVinars. Trish, thank you again for all you do for Washington students and for this amazing presentation.
Thank you so very much. Thank you all for joining us too.